Hello, everyone. This is Nathan Slower. I'm with Disability Advocates of Kent County, and we are so excited today to be sharing our space with Jonathan White, who will be speaking at our upcoming Absolutely Accessible Kent event. And Patrick is going to tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I am Patrick Parks. I help coordinate our Absolutely Accessible Kent project and the event as well, along with it. And as Nathan said, we're really excited to have Jonathan joining us. And we want to learn a little bit more about Jonathan before we get to see him in person on June 9th. And so, Jonathan, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and about the work that you all are doing at University of Buffalo?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Patrick. I've been working at the University of Buffalo's Idea Center now for about 15 years. We're a research center in the School of Architecture and Planning here. We're the only school that has a concentration in inclusive design in, as part of our master's program. And that's actually how I got started here. I was in the first class when they started these master's concentrations. And it just made sense to me because inclusive design, universal design, whichever you call it, it's about designing buildings that work well for everybody and that work well for the person. It's not just some art project or making something that looks pretty. That's certainly part of good design all around, but making sure that it works functionally for people as well. And so that really struck a note with me, after my undergraduate career, when a lot of it was very design focused on the aesthetics. I said, well, what about the people? And so the field really spoke to me. And so when I went into that, there was an opening here at the Idea Center as a graduate assistant. And so I did that while I was doing my master's degree in that program. And I just stayed along after graduation. I stayed on and became full-time staff.
That's amazing, and the uniqueness of the Idea Center really strikes me in terms of being that kind of center for excellence on inclusive design and universal design. And so, talk about, if you would, some projects that you all have worked on and some unique areas that you've been able to influence in terms of research, in terms of just contributions to the field itself.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of experience in research. We've been around since 1984. And since 1999, we've held a Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center, or RERC, on universal design. And that's a 5-year, $5 million grant that periodically gets re-awarded. We've held that grant since 1999. We also do a grant on accessible public transportation. In our center, we have also environmental designers, urban planners, industrial systems engineers as well, and from time to time, occupational therapists and others. And so under these grants, we do a lot of different things. We do research, of course. And so some of the research projects, for example, we looked at the needs of wheel mobility users, over 500 of them actually, which is way more than was used to develop the original standards that were used to inform accessibility codes, which is a huge difference from universal design. We're a sample of about 60 or 70, right? So we've got this much larger database of users and their capabilities based on their devices. And we've actually helped use those standards to inform changes to national standards based on that research. Another thing we've done is developed innovative solutions for universal design, or ISUD, which is a certification program in universal design. Based on all that experience that we have, we said, well, practitioners need a way to say, how do I go beyond just the minimum accessibility codes? And how do I know my building is really achieving? So we created this certification program similar to LEED for sustainability. How do I make my building more green, more sustainable? Well, how do I make my building more universally designed? So we created that certification program, and I helped work on that. Some of the other work we do, so that's all based on our research. We've also done development projects where we've worked with companies to help them develop better products. So in public transportation, to help develop better public transportation systems. We looked at bus, ramp slopes and the kneeling buses and the fare payments and all of that. We also worked with a company called Touch Graphics to help them develop touch models of places like the Smithsonian and Alcatraz. So people who might not be able to see can go and feel the model, and it'll speak to them and tell them what it is. And we helped develop some of the first prototypes for that as well. And of course, we do training and dissemination activities as well, and design services. So we will go out and actually measure buildings or public rights of way to see how universally designed they are or how well they meet accessibility codes. Either somebody hires us because they want to just do better, or maybe there's a lawsuit and they want to defend or sue somebody, and we'll go out and help with that as well. We also design houses, house modifications for people who have disabilities, and so they might not have money to afford, to do it themselves, and there's state programs that help pay for ramps or bathroom modifications to homes. And so we'll go out to people's homes and design, specific interventions for those clients. So we do a wide range of activities here, and we all wear a lot of hats.
An amazing depth and breadth of work, both. And I just wanted to touch on too, diving into that a little bit, in terms of when you've gone out and you've done this work, this research, and made some of these amazing improvements to environments. What's been some of the, I guess, after effect, right? Or as you've gone back in and you've been able to interact with folks after they've used these new universally designed spaces. We always like to talk about the fact that it doesn't just benefit individuals with disabilities, but really benefits everyone from a user experience standpoint. And so do you have some specific examples or stories, experiences around that, how spaces have begun to work even better for just the general population after you all have gone in and consulted?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'll be talking about in the presentation, I'll be giving one of those examples of a residence hall that was developed and designed using a draft version of this ISUD. And we did some pre and post evaluation. Actually, we did a comparative evaluation. I'm thinking of a different project that did the pre and post, but we compared the building to a residence hall that was next to it in many different ways, taking people who are not familiar with either building and guiding them through and asking them to do things and perform tasks and asking them to rate it. And then we took residents of the buildings who didn't know there was a comparison going on and asked them about things and how easy can visitors find their way, and lighting satisfaction and temperature satisfaction and other things like that, getting around and moving around the space. And the universally designed building, of course, scored much higher on many measures. And if you were to look just at the non-universally designed building by itself, a lot of things scored above, the medium, the middle, the baseline scored well, but universal design always scored a lot higher. And we've done this in workplace settings as well. So we've done studies for that. We've also done complete street studies where we looked at the streetscape and said, okay, pre and post intervention. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. That study and what that found. But it's really difficult to quantify. It's not like sustainability where you can, say, okay, well, this light bulb costs a little more up front, but this is how much energy you save over this time frame. You'll make that money back. It's a little tougher to quantify. So it takes a lot of research and a lot of different studies. And of course, people can't sit there and take a 2-hour survey, right? So you're only, every study you do, you're just getting a small snapshot. So if you're doing a workplace, you're focusing on productivity and other, workplace related goals and see how well it improves that. And then you have competing design interests as well in any project, right? No two projects are identical. So, in a workplace, we might talk about universal design, but there might be some other objective that we want to have an open concept workspace. Well, maybe that drives perceptions back down because there's something there that's competing with the universal design objectives, right? And so it's trying to make sure we design these guidelines that we have, this ISUD standard, make sure we have enough stuff in there that people are designing a very good building or very good outdoor space. We've done playgrounds as well with it. But also making sure that we can account for any other things people might try to do to the space that we don't account for. And so it becomes tricky trying to measure and say, okay, well, did universal design have the positive effect? If it didn't have a positive effect in this case, why not? Because they did this other thing. okay, well, we have to make sure we put that in our standard and tell them not to do that other thing.
Right.
And so it's constantly this cycle, and that's why we call universal design a process. It's always continually improving. You can always accommodate more and more of the population, and do a better and better job at it as more research and more evidence comes in. And that's sort of the point of evidence-based practice, is to keep refining, keep getting better.
Exactly. And I'm particularly struck by the fact that you all have the unique benefit of being part of a university too, as well. So being able to do that research that you mentioned, also putting that into practice, but then shaping the next generation of practitioners as well too, right? So can you talk a little bit about that too? I mean, you mentioned this idea of sometimes educating folks on these competing priorities and things that come up within projects. How have you all been able to sort of shape the next generation, shape the profession, so to speak, to really embed that importance of universal design? So it's not just something, it's not just this feature that's nice to have, but it's something that's really this universal benefit that every project should be considering as they're looking at all of these competing priorities.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the ways we do that is through our goals of universal design, which I'll talk about during the presentation as well. But essentially, we want to make sure that people understand the outcomes, what is the goal here in design. And all of the goals, for example, body fit is one of the goals, comfort is a goal, social interaction is a goal. Those are all goals that you wouldn't say, that's just for people with disabilities. That's just for the group or that group. Those are good for all designs. Every design should fit people's bodies well. Every design should be comfortable for the users. And so by having these goals and trying to say, look, the design isn't about this or that. It's about having a goal and trying to achieve that goal. And how do we achieve that goal? And instead of trying to memorize a list of 500 solutions like we've got in our ISUD, instead of making it this checklist, it's what are the goals, what are we trying to achieve here, and who does it benefit, and how can we increase the number of people that benefits. And so universal design is always best practice when you think about it from the beginning, and it's just part of your design philosophy. We want everybody to be able to equally access space, instead of designing a space like normal and then trying to shoehorn in some intervention to make it work for people with disabilities. It's just part of the practice.
Right, exactly. And have you seen, I'm just curious, from, again, being a university, being a thought leader in this space, have you seen other institutions, schools of architecture, urban planning sort of follow your lead in some cases in terms of seeing the value and saying, we need to start better educating our students coming up in the profession on some of these areas?
I think we have. I'm not fully tuned into every university and what they're doing, but we get a lot of requests for us to come and give presentations within these other classes, whether it's an interior design school wants us to come in and present to them, or a school that might not have a master's program in architecture but has an undergraduate program. They want us to come in and talk to the students. And so I've done a lot of that over the years. Even like within occupational therapy, they want us to come in and give talks as well. And then we're seeing a lot of demand from companies as well, ticking up in the past few years, with a move towards trying to create more inclusive environments all around in workplaces. A lot of people are realizing that part of an inclusive environment is the building itself. And we look at universal design, it's not just the building, it's the whole system. Right. And as technology advances, it's about how these systems all come together. So it's the building, it's how you get to the building, how you find your way to the building, the website, perhaps, with public transit, it's of course even bigger. It's the vehicles, it's how you pay for your fare, the smartphone integration, there's all sorts of things. And some of these technologies are working their way into buildings and office spaces as well. And so we're seeing a lot of demand there too, as well as from architecture firms, because they're seeing it from their clients. So we have architecture firms coming to us looking for credit, and we offer continuing education credit for architects to be able to learn about universal design, and help their clients better. So we have been seeing, particularly in the past 5 years or so, a lot of people reaching out to us to get us to get our input and to help them make their buildings better.
So that's actually a perfect segue into my next question. I thought you put it so nicely in terms of the building is important, right? But it's not just the building. It's the environment beyond the building as well. It's the transit system that allows for movement without or within an area and to a building and from a building. And so can you talk a little bit about that as well? That's one of the things that I'm excited to hear from you. And it's a new feature of our event this year, sort of having more of that designated urban planning track, that city planning aspect. And how does inclusive design fit within city planning more broadly? Again, it's not just the built space, but it's the entire system of built spaces working together. And so I think this would be a perfect time if you could give folks kind of a teaser or a promo in terms of what can they look forward to hearing from you on June 9th.
Yeah, so I mean, urban planners are tasked sort of with this larger concept. You know, they're focused on a lot of things, right? It's not just about, you know, roads or you know, speed limits or stop signs, or it's not just about zoning, right? It's about a lot of things. It's about, you know, sustainability and walkability. It's about transportation. It's about access to services, you know, access to food and healthy food. It's about affordability, crime prevention, safety. And so there's all these different things that are being looked at. And every community is different. You know, you might have population declines in one area, or you might see a demographic shift where the population is getting older, young people aren't moving in, housing prices are being affected. And so universal design looks at all of that as a whole and says, well, what can we do? So we'll talk a little bit about how could we have a zoning code that makes the environment more inclusive? You know, what different types of zoning would actually work, and what could be considered that can help set the stage to make more you know, a more inclusive neighborhood, and how that overlaps with several other goals that a lot of urban planners are already onto, like sustainability, walkability. These are, you know, features that a lot of people are looking at, saying, you know, we've kind of designed, you know, places a little bit too much towards the car and not enough towards people. And universal design says, look at people. And so we'll reinforce some of that. And that's what Complete Streets is about as well. And so we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about some specific ideas. We'll give a few examples of you know, connectivity between neighborhoods and what certain things can be done, you know, in the planning environment to you know, make it better. So we'll talk about the big picture, you know, zoning and, you know, the whole city, and then we'll give some examples of little things like, well, what might you do at an intersection to make it a little bit better? And so we'll go through all those different levels, and we'll talk about policy issues as well in terms of housing, you know, and like I said, zoning. So we'll get into all of that.
That's amazing. I know I've learned something just in this short time with you this morning. So I wanted to again extend a thank you for being here with us this morning. And we definitely, it makes me even more excited to learn more from you on June 9th. And I know our viewers here today and throughout the week sharing that excitement. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on June 9th. Everybody that's watching us today as well, and in the future, do not forget to get your tickets today.
Thank you, and I look forward to it as well.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and please visit us at dakc.us/events to pick up your ticket today and hear from more great speakers like Jonathan.